stamp set, and the code is JGS739 and it's called Sketchy Pine Cones. I'm also going to use Distress Oxide in frayed burlap, Distress Oxide in walnut stain, Distress Oxide in forest moss. You'll also need a black ink pad, and my choice is a VersaFine Onyx Black. I'm using 3 different kinds of card from the Creative Expressions Foundations range. I'm going to use Milk for my stamping card. I'm going to use Craft Card to make my base card. And I'm going to use Chestnut for my layers. I'm going to start off with my Milk card, which is cut to fit a 7x5. So this piece of card is 6.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And I'm going to put the distress ink all around the edges towards the middle. So I get some ink on my applicator, and starting from the edge, apply the frayed burlap ink all the way around. Don't press very hard, and then you should get a nice even finish without too many marks. And another tip I have is take a piece of scrap paper or scrap card to put your fingers on, so that you're not going to get fingerprints in the ink, because it stays wet for a little bit, and you'll keep your fingers nice and clean as well. So we'll just finish applying this to the card. This is just our background, and I wouldn't worry too much if you've got a few darker bits and lighter bits, and maybe some marks from your applicator, because as I say, this is your background, and we're going to do lots of things to it, so you probably won't even notice. So there's my distressed background, and I'm going to take a paintbrush and pot of water, and you'll need some kitchen towel. So wet your brush, shake off the excess, and tap the brush from the top and splatter that water all around the card. Every now and again, take a piece of kitchen towel, place it over the card and take away the water, and it will leave you with little teeny weeny flecks. So when the water is on the card, it wets the ink, and when you put the kitchen towel on, it takes away the ink. Leaves a nice, interesting background. Apply some more water with the paintbrush if you want. Always take the kitchen towel and blot it, because that takes away the ink. And I think that's a nice finished result. So can you see those little watermarks? I'll just dry up any water. Make sure this is nice and dry before you start stamping on it. So I'm going to take my stamping mat, and I've put my stamps onto an acrylic block, and I'm going to use the Distress Oxide Walnut Stain. So I'm going to ink my stamp. Distress Oxide is a really good ink pad for stamping with, and this is going to go approximately there. And we're going to ink it up and stamp again. And we're going to stamp that one. Where are we going to stamp that one? It's coming from the top. There we are. Okay. Now we're going to take the Distress Oxide Forest Moss, and I've put my pine needles onto an acrylic block, and you'll notice there's a little gap in the middle. When you ink it up and stamp it, you're going to line the branches of the image on here with the gap that's on the pine needles, and I'll show you how to do that. So we'll ink up that. and hover over the little branch and stamp your pine needles so that you can see you've got the branch right in the middle of the pine needles. Ink it up again. I'm just going to put a little bit of paper behind my card there so I don't get too much ink on my stamping pad. So we'll do it again here. It doesn't matter if you overstamp the pine cones with the needles, it all looks nice and realistic. And the nice thing about having the pine cones and the pine needles separate is that you can stamp them in different colours. So it's the same process each time. Ink each time, find the gap in the pine needle stamp and put that little branch in that gap. Easy to see with these clear stamps. So there's my finished image. Quite realistic. What I have done as well is I have stamped 3 pine cones from the stamp set and cut them out. And I'm going to apply a little bit of distress ink to the pine cones. You don't need very much, and I'm just rubbing it around the edges so that it gets a little bit of colour on it. Try to put more colour on one side than the other. So now you can see it has a little bit of colour on it. I've also put foam pads on the back, ready to 3D them. On the stamp set there is a greeting, and I've stamped that onto a piece of milk card. I've put the distress ink on the background just like I did with the main piece, with this piece, and I splattered that with water and blotted it, and then when it was dry I stamped the greeting with the black ink pad. I've cut my backing layer from the chestnut card, and I'm using the Cosmic Shimmer acrylic glue to stick it all together. So apply a smaller amount of glue around the edges and a little bit in the middle as well. You do not need to put lots and lots of glue on here. Okay, layer that up onto the brown. So lay that up onto the brown, gives it a nice frame. And I've made my base card with the craft card, and as I say, it's 5 by 7, so I've done 7 inches down that edge and 10 inches across there, scoring at 5 inches in the middle, which creates your base card. Put some glue behind the chestnut layer. This is quite a simple, quick card to make. When you're doing lots and lots of Christmas cards, you can pre-stamp all the fir cones and perhaps cut them out, ready to assemble. When I've finished layering up my card, I like to take my bone folder, and I do like to go round all the edges, and it flattens everything and makes sure it's really well stuck down. So now it's onto my base card. Now we're going to stick the pine cones over our image, and I've done 3 pine cones, and it was it's this one I've used, so it's easy to cut out. So you have to just stick them down wherever you fancy. I'm going to have one up here, and I'll have one on the other side. can go about there. So now I've got my 3D pine cones. I mean, I've put 3 on, but you can just do 2, or you could just do 1. You can also make this a smaller card as well by only using 1 branch on a smaller size card. So I've got my greeting, that's already layered up onto my chestnut card. And we'll put that down here, I think. And to finish off, we're going to use the Cosmic Shimmer Gold Twinkles to give it a little bit of sparkle, ready for Christmas. And I'm going to squeeze it away from the card to start it off and put a little blob of glue onto the bits of pine cone. I'm only just doing one side of each pine cone. I'm just touching the nozzle onto the stamped image, and it's like drawing with the glitter, and it will just bring it to life straight away. Makes it really sparkle, looks fantastic, nice and festive. And it'll probably take about half an hour or so to dry, as long as you haven't put too much on. And I'm only literally putting a very, very small amount on each one. But it doesn't really matter if you put too much on. So I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see that sparkle